African spirituality. I want to talk about it because I know there's a lot of young African people who have questions about it. A lot of African youth struggle with finding meaning in life and understanding what are the deeper issues related to life. So I have a lot of young people who ask me, what is African spirituality? I think I need to understand African spirituality. I feel I'm lost when it comes to understanding it. So African spirituality, basically, let me start it this way. To understand life in an African sense, you cannot take spirit out of the equation. To understand what Africa is about, what African history and culture and life is about, you have to position spirituality at the center, because the birth of ideas, the birth of people, the birth of life, the birth of everything that can be conceptualized and created starts with energy, starts with spirit. So if you don't want to, or if you cannot understand spirit, you will lose the script of life. So spirituality basically is the invisible script of life. It means that there is a bigger meaning to life than what we can see with the physical eye, or what exists in the physical. There is a metaphysical aspect of life which includes the spirit world, our ancestors, the not yet born, good and bad spirits, rituals, ceremonies, and a aspect which is, and this is seen as reality. It's not seen as a mythical, faraway place that only few people can go to. It's seen as an integral aspect of life. So part of African spirituality is to be able to live with this duality seamlessly. When you go into a spiritual world and you come into the physical world, and you live with the physical world and the spiritual world as, in a way, they coexist. They are part of the same experience, or they interact as one experience. So the significance of African spirituality is that, and I think this is important for many people to know, because sometimes, especially people who are very strong in Black consciousness and political thought, they doubt spirituality, because sometimes spirituality is seen as submission, it's seen as bowing down to a particular order and follow a script that you cannot intervene in. And a lot of people see that as weakness. African spirituality is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength and power. But this is maybe where some people get lost, because you cannot enter African spirituality just through your intellectual mind. So you can't just contain spirit by explaining it, putting it into a theory and test it. African spirituality is very much about experience. Experience is given very high value in the African world of knowledge. So knowledge in an African sense is not just what you can attain and what you can acquire through your mind and thinking and reading. It's also what you can tap into through your experience, through your ability to be innovative, in the ability to use your intuition. And intuition is very, very, very important within African spirituality. It means to pick up certain codes and messages that others might not see and understand or be aware of. So it is a consciousness about power. It's a consciousness about rooting and centering yourself in a knowledge and awareness about the cosmic world, not just the earthly, physical, day-to-day world. We need to understand religions differently from spirituality. There is a relation somehow, but if I should just cut it very bluntly, religion is systematic and very often, in our experience, oppressive ways of centering some form of spiritual doctrine at the center of our life. Very often it is fear-based. Very often it is about what will happen to you if you don't follow this faith. Very often it is about, for instance, in the Christian sense, about sin, about hell, about the devil, about Satan, about a lot of negative, very oppressive forces. And although other religions might not have the same emphasis, very often there's a fear-based approach to religion. African spirituality is not a system you just follow blindly. It is a practical setup for you to navigate through life. So it gives you a template to deal with birth, to deal with death, to deal with marriage, to deal with family conflicts, to deal with interpersonal relationships, to deal with when you hate somebody, when somebody's jealous of you, when it's a very practical understanding of how to deal with certain dynamics that comes into our lives. It also gives, and I think it's important to remember that the fear that we have of African spirituality is also a design. Remember, we have been taken away from our reality, or from our history, from our understanding of who we once were. So if that is our experience, that we actually don't remember who we were, and when African spirituality very often is projected in very demonic ways, in very useless ways, in very childish and very superstitious ways, we feel embarrassed about this. We want to remove ourselves from this. We want to prove to the world that we are people of knowledge and science in the script of those who oppressed us. We cannot use that script for very much. So it is important that we also shed ourselves, because I want to say this, there are people within the African conscious community that are very strong on African or Black revolutionary thought. But if you look at it, they are using a very Eurocentric lens to position that knowledge and that consciousness. An African position, you cannot avoid spirit. You cannot go outside of spirit. You cannot deny the importance of spirituality. So we need to decolonize that fear. We need to understand better what African spirituality is and how it can help us. And it has a very practical role in that it gives us tools and ways to operate in everyday life situations. I think it is very true that there's the issue of young people being fearful and having misunderstood African spirituality on one side. But on the other side, there's also many African youth who just say, this is boring, this is not relevant, this doesn't touch me in any place, this is not something that I need in my life. And a response to that is, first and foremost, that I think that those of us who share information about spirituality and practice African spirituality, some of us are maybe not the best promoters, if I should use that word, of spirituality, because let's be honest, some people present African knowledge in a very boring and irrelevant way, especially to young people. When young people listen and when young people try to understand, they say, okay, I think I understand what you mean, but it has very little to do with my world and the challenge that I face. And I think instead of us just shouting at young people saying that they must come closer to us, I think it's important that we bring this message closer to them. And we start by understanding the world that they live in, what goes through their mind, what are their anxieties, what are their fears, what are their issues, what are their dreams and hopes that they have. And then we start sharing. I think some of us become pushy on these things. You say, you must know your culture, you must know how to practice certain rituals, you must do this, and if you don't, then you are irrelevant. I think I want to respect that young people don't see it as relevant and understand why, but also meet them halfway and say that I think it's still relevant for a young African person in this time and age to understand and to immerse themselves into African spirituality. And that means an understanding of what rituals means, what ceremonies means, why symbolic rituals are very important for understanding life, why going through initiations are very, very important, the importance of symbolisms in our life, the importance of dress codes, the importance of understanding nature, understanding the higher realms of spirit, understanding prayer, understanding drums, what drum beat means, and it's not an entertainment, understanding that African dance is not just something you do to entertain people. It is a ritual of strength, of power, of regaining some of the things that we have lost. And for me, I want to position African spirituality as a revolutionary tool, as a tool that we need in our fight against white supremacy, against oppression, against colonialism, and against coloniality, and use it as very practical ways of recharging and re-strengthening ourselves. You know what? I think if we really understand how oppressed we are, how disenfranchised we have been, how disempowered, how broken in many ways our families, communities, and people have become, I wouldn't understand how we could not think of a spiritual way as well, together with every other strategy, to regain our purpose, our strength, and our presence and relevance. So for me, African spirituality is very practical, and I'll give you some examples. For instance, in a household, I think it's very important that African spirituality is not something we do at events, not something we do at workshops. Well, we can do it there too, but that should not be the primary site. The primary site must be in the place that I live, operate, sleep, eat, and prepare myself to go out and face a world that has an issue with me. So, for instance, the way we talk to each other, the way we address problems, the way we deal with conflicts, the way we deal with when somebody's hurt and somebody upset and somebody's has experienced something awful within our families, that becomes something that we need to address from a spiritual point of view. We also need to give honor and presence to our family members. So, for instance, initiation becomes very important. How to go, for instance, from girlhood to womanhood, from boyhood to manhood. That's a community ritual of actually announcing that we now have a new woman or a new man in our midst. And this person now has new responsibilities. This person now can be expected to perform certain duties. That's important for self, because when you are received and embraced by your community, and you know that they expect certain things from you, presence comes into your being, purpose comes into your being. You feel that the ground under your feet vibrates differently. So for me, African spirituality is a practical aspect of the totality of life. I think that as a people that have been put so far off our own center, we are easy to manipulate. We are vulnerable when it comes to spirituality. We are not spiritually fit. We don't have a strong lens to understand when somebody's taking advantage of us and when somebody's giving us a message and a opportunity to really come into ourselves. And I think we've had, I don't want to mention names at this point, but I think this is for each and every individual to think, have you decolonized your path into spirituality? What brought you into the spirituality that you have now? Whose voices have you listened to? And where is yours within that? Where is the African voice within the spirituality that you have embraced? If we look at what other people have done to us, and they have forced us into their spiritual systems, which we must understand is not just about spirituality and faith, it's also about culture. Europeans, Arabs, other nations, they have forced us into their cultural habits, cultural naming, cultural praising, cultural ethos, cultural philosophy, cultural practical life. And when we blindly take over that culture, we can only become, if even that, halfway. We will never become fully what they put in place, because we are not them. And every spirituality, every culture has an origin. Ours originate in Africa. We originate in Africa. Other people originate other places. They have walked a different path, and they should keep their spirituality. They should understand what their spirituality is about, but it is not ours. I don't think that it's just one universal spirituality that speaks to everyone. We come from different places and different walks, and we need to attune ourselves into that first and foremost. I think I cannot be the judge of anybody's spiritual choice, or any other choice for that matter. But I can say that it is important that we decolonize every aspect of ourselves, including spirituality. And I think that many of us might agree up until that point. A lot of people become very standoffish when it comes to issues of spirituality and faith, and they say, we don't cross this line, don't come any closer, don't make me think differently about this. And I think this becomes difficult the older people get, because you can imagine if people have spent 30 years within a particular faith system and base their lives on that, and now find out that that actually is not the best way to position your life. It's hard to admit that you actually chose something that wasn't of relevance to you as an African person and change. So my message or my encouragement to young people is, and I love that young people are asking these questions, and a lot of elders get upset, a lot of families get upset when young people ask these questions and start to dress, start to talk, start to embrace other ways of approaching spirituality. And I think that instead of being upset, parents and elders should be happy that my child is not just a follower. My child is not just somebody who sheepishly and out of fear follow whatever has been presented to her or him. African young people who stand up and say, I think there's a different script, I think there's a different narrative, I think there's a deeper grounding for my spiritual awakening. Those are relevant African young people. So if that means that we leave oppressive religion, I will just say great. But I cannot push. I mean, of course, religion and faith is very sensitive issues. And I understand that some people feel pushed, they feel threatened when we bring up this information. But I think we need to have a space where we are able to talk about this without just pushing, but about finding. This must be about finding the truth, finding our essence, and reconnect with the disconnect that was done to us. Well, African spirituality is practical and it's experiential, meaning that it's not just something you write and read about, it's something you experience. So you cannot really discuss a ritual, you can take part in it, you can be part of it, and you can experience what it means to go through it. And then you have an understanding of what it means, whether it worked for you or not. So I think the best thing that we can do is to introduce our young people into, because that is our role as elders, to guide them through this. Young people should not sit down and have this as their own challenge to find out what does it mean to be an African spiritual person. It is a crime that we are committing against our youth if we cannot answer their questions, if we cannot respond to the things that they want to know. We are supposed to guide them through. We are supposed to show them this is what you do when this problem occurs. This is how you deal with health. This is how you prevent yourself from getting sick. This is what you do when you meet a life partner or somebody that you think you want to spend your life with. This is the ritual you need to go through. This is how you test if the love is real. This is what you do to understand how to align yourself. We are doing a great injustice by not having that knowledge ourselves. So maybe more than to the youth, the challenge is really to the older generation. What spiritual knowledge can we really guide our young people through? So to young people, I would say, keep asking questions and keep finding sources of strength, sources of quiet confidence that take you through, and don't listen to the voices that are forcing you, pushing you, and trying to bring you quickly into their system. Listen to those voices that seem to give you information, give you a stronger ground to walk on, give you a stronger purpose to live for. Those are the criteria that I think you should put for your spiritual conscious growth.